May we not die unlived lives. May we allow our living to open us, to make us less afraid and more accessible, to loosen our hearts until they become wings. May we choose to risk our significance, to live so that which comes to us as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which comes to us as blossom goes on as fruit. On this divine December day, and in the blessed place wherever you may be right now, I welcome you to this gathering dedicated to remembering, blessing, and appreciating our beloved family member, father, grandfather, mentor, and friend, David Dubuc. On behalf of David, I welcome each of you. I'm Beth Monteith, the Fellowship's Minister Emeritus. I find it a great honor to be with you today and celebrate David's life. At this time, the Fellowship's current minister and phenomenal leader, Mary Sabai, will lead us in prayer.
I'd like to invite you all to close your eyes as we hold our dear David close in our hearts. Father, Mother, God, we come together to celebrate our beloved David's life. A divine light that touched us all. We celebrate the many, many memories we will always carry in our hearts. We celebrate a life of integrity and grace and service. A life that was a legacy of love to all those left behind. David knew that this earth is not our true home. We are only passing through. And we are all so grateful for the time we shared with this beautiful soul. May David's wonderful, inspiring life continue to be a comfort and inspiration to us all. And let us hold each other in love and support. And remember that his loving energy is always with us. Amen, and so it is. Thank you. And now we're so blessed and grateful because of technology that we can have David's son Ryan and his East Coast family with us this afternoon so that they can express themselves about their life and memories of David.
So my name is Richard Dubuc, and I'm David's younger brother, youngest brother actually, youngest in the family. And what I like to say about my brother is that as children, we really didn't get along very well. That kind of carried on throughout our lives, although we were very cordial with each other. We don't want to go. So David was, when I visited him, and about a year ago, it was on his 77th birthday, December 6th. We had a great conversation about what I just spoke to you about. And what we found out about ourselves was that we really loved each other as brothers, but we didn't really care for each other as people. So we talked that through, and we came to an agreement that we're not that bad. So I really do miss him more than I thought I would, actually. I think that's the love part of it. And we just decided that we would be friendly with each other as long as we could live on. And that's pretty much it. I don't have a lot of stories with him, although as a youngster, I do remember down on McGill Street. Ryan knows where McGill Street is, and we played out in the backyard a few times, keep away with the football, little baseball, things like that. So I miss him. And that's about it for me.
Okay, my name is Janet Mackey, and I'm Dave's sister. As Norm said, he was 2 years, 5 months older than David. I'm 15 months younger than David. And I guess my relationship was totally different, being the only girl in the family with David than anyone else's. We grew up very close together. We were never in competition. David was very much, as you heard, a boy, and I was very much a girl. He had no interest in dolls or doll houses or playing school or any of that. But we did have a very close relationship all through our life. One of the real specific times would be when we were in junior high school. Norm had gone to, started at St. Raphael's Academy, and David and I were still in junior high. We were back to back in school years, and Rich was young. He was probably first, second grade, so he was still in elementary. And during that time, when we'd come home from school, never walked together or anything, but if we would get home at the same time, we would watch American Bandstand, and we could be dancing around the living room, and I really enjoyed that time. David had a big collection of 45 records back in those days, and he would go to this store that had old records off the jukeboxes and buy them for next to nothing. I'm not sure if they were 5 or 10 cents a piece or something. And anyway, he would have a huge collection. He had a huge collection of 45 records. So we had, all through our life really had a good relationship. I think Dave, as Norm kind of pointed out, was he probably never really could figure out where he was going. I don't think he really, identified like a psychology or any of that. That just wasn't part of the time. He had a hard time figuring out where he was going. After high school, he went on to business school at Johnson & Wales and did his 2 years there, but I don't think it ever excited him. And of course, that was followed by him going in the Air Force. And even that, he wanted to really be a pilot, but he was not able to be because he didn't pass the physical. And from what he had said to us, is he didn't pass the physical because he had fillings in his teeth. It's hard to believe that that's what the world was like back then. So I don't think even his military career was that satisfactory. I mean, he really didn't figure out where he was going until he had really recovered and got his back on his feet. And at that point, he really did figure out where he was going. Remember that Christmas, he had now moved back to McGill Street with our parents. We were had Christmas dinner at our house, and I was in the kitchen with our father and saying to my father that our father, isn't it great Dave's going back to school? And Dad's, yeah, it's great he's going to school. I haven't got a clue what he's going to do with psychology. And I said to Dad, well, why don't you ask him? And on cue, you would think it was planned, David comes walking into the kitchen and says, ask him what? And I said, well, Dad wants to know what you're going to do with psychology. And he said, my goal, my plan is I want to work with companies that will help their employees with alcohol and drug problems. And as we all know, that's exactly what he did. He went back to school. He had done, as I said, 2 years at a junior college, and then had some courses while he was in the Air Force. So he probably didn't have quite 2 years to do, but he did go back, completed his undergraduate at Roger Williams College, went on to get his first master's degree at Rhode Island College, and following that, went out to Michigan, Michigan State, where he got his second master's degree. And that really was the division of his life. His New England days were over, and he stayed out in Michigan. After that, our dad had died in 1980 while he was either still in school or just out of school. And then he would come back to, stay with our mother in Pawtucket till she moved up to Massachusetts when she sold the house. Kind of convinced her that it would be nice if she was nearer me. And so she did. She moved up here, and about 2.5 miles from our house, there's a beautiful development that for seniors. And that's where she was. And he would come out a couple of times a year, visit with her. And I remember one particular time back, well, after she had gone, there was only a 1-bedroom apartment, so it was not really conducive to having company. But she did have a pull-out couch, and he would come out with Ryan, and one of them would be in the couch and one of them on the floor. One year I said to him, why don't you stay with us? We're only 2.5 miles away. And well, okay, so the next time they came out, that's what they did. They stayed with us and visited with her. We thought it worked out great. Sunday they left. Monday I went to visit my mother, and talking about it, and oh yeah, it was a good weekend. And my mother goes, well, I guess that means they're never going to stay with me again. I came home, called David, and said, we are in trouble. And after that, they stayed with her until she passed away about 10 years ago. And then at that time, he started coming here, and he would come for 3 or 4 days at a time, a couple of times a year. All of us would get together, go out for dinner, have a great time. But Phil and I both, I probably should have introduced Phil in the beginning. My husband's sitting here also. Phil and I really enjoyed having him here. He was just really unbelievable. His day, his discipline, getting up, meditating, taking his notes, writing. It was just amazing to have him here. He was really an inspiration. He would talk about his work and working with people. And as I said, once he found out this is what he wanted to do, he never faltered. He really did have a very humanitarian side to him. And yeah, as with Rich, I can say, yeah, we miss him a lot. In fact, he would have been here just last week, the week before, because we would always come the beginning of December, and all of us would go out to eat. But he and Phil would spend hours and hours talking. And to have two people that are different, they are probably more different than you can imagine. They were on most things opposite sides of any equation. But they always got along. A lot of respect for David's thinking, and vice versa. It was really just a joy, and something we'll miss for a long time to come. I mean, we were really happy that last November, just before Rich went out in December, Phil and I went out in November. We had kind of thought, well, do we go last November, or do we wait till this spring? And thank goodness we went, because with COVID, we never would have got out there. But it was great to see him in his own house and now be able to envision him sitting there in his house, in his own environment. I mean, he was so proud of his yard and all the work he had done with the rocks and making his gardens and so forth. So I guess that's really what I have to say. We'll miss him forever. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a couple of comments on what Rich said. There were a lot of times where we had fun out in the backyard playing ball. Dave and I were trying to teach Rich how to run with a football. He did pretty good. He was a good chugger. And other sports, baseball and all of that. So there was quite a bit of cooperation there and fun. But also we painted houses for my father. And as we were older, I was the oldest, of course. My name's Norm, sorry. I'm David's older brother. I am 25 and a half months older than him. And we had our differences growing up, but we also did a lot of good things together. And I would go back on what Richard said when we were painting houses together, David, Richard, and me, particularly Capitol Street, not Capitol Street, it was Pawtucket Avenue. These were houses that my father owned, that his father had owned before him. And they were in a corporation between my father and his sisters. And we painted those houses and we had a good time. And we worked together, we had good teamwork, and we also fell in a few buckets of paint, but that's another story. But there were some good times there. Okay, best things I remember, going back on David, and my early remembrances, we like to do things together, family activities, indoor games, backyard contests, and sports. As an older brother, I always expected to win. I took it for granted that I would win over my younger brother and brothers. And Dave had different ideas though. And so as a consequence, we did a lot of bickering. And I think this was a result of David's wanting to compete and to beat me at times. And most of the time, when he wanted to get his point across or to win something, he would set me up against my father or an uncle, and I would be the one who got in trouble. And one of the best examples of that I can remember, and I'm saying this humorously, I'm not saying it nasty or anything like that. We went up to Vermont, David and I, we spent a month up there. My cousin Arlene came down, spent a month with Janet. And we went up with my mother's next older sister, Aunt Lena, and her husband, Uncle Tom. And they took us up there, and then they came back and left us there. And then later in the summer, the family, mom and dad and Jen. And I think Rich was just probably born around that time. And they came up to get us. But just to illustrate the point I want to make, Uncle Ken, Auntie I, they took us fishing one night down by a lake. And Auntie I made a comment that Dave picked up on real quick, and so did I, that she was going to bring extra clothing in case any of us fell in the water. And I think that turned a light on in Dave's mind, because when we're fishing, he's on a rock and I'm on a rock, and we're at least 10 or 12 feet, maybe 14 feet apart. And Uncle Ken was in the middle, standing on the shoreline, throwing his fishing pole in the water. I think we had these little fishing poles, but I don't remember much about those. And Uncle Ken wasn't getting any luck where he was. He moved away and left Dave and I kind of next to each other, but a pretty good distance apart. And as soon as he walked away, within minutes, Dave fell in the water. And I think he actually flopped into the water. I don't think he slipped. And first thing was, Norm, push me. Norm, push me. And I'm 10 to 14 feet away from him. And Uncle Ken wouldn't hear any of that. You pushed him. And boy, I got in trouble with Uncle Ken. And that ended it. We packed up. Dave got his clothes changed, got dry clothes on. I'm sure he grinned all the way back to the farmhouse. But I got blamed and he set it up. So probably a good indication of his psychology, his inclination towards psychology. And he did these things with my folks a lot, particularly my father. And he'd set something up. I'd get blamed for it. I'm going to get you, Dave. And Dave would be out the house, running up the street, probably 150 to 200 yards up toward the Nolans and the Ryans. And just in case I came after him, he'd probably go in their house. But Dad always slowed me up the door. I got in trouble, and that was it. But Dave did a good job setting me up on those. There's only a couple more things, and what those were, just to give you an idea of what David's thoughts were maybe on psychology, not thoughts, but his inclination toward it. When Robbie and I started going out, this was in '65, before I got back on active duty and went to Germany. We had a few dates, but Dave saw that maybe before I realized that this was more than just another date. There might be something serious going on here. And as it turned out, there was. But I think Dave figured out she wouldn't have had anything to do with me if she was driving in my dirty car, on dates. So Dave got him and Rich together. And every time I had a date, not the first date, but after that, and there weren't many, only half a dozen dates, and then I was gone. And Dave and Rich in the car. So we saved our Robbie and I's relationship, and consequently we got married. So give Dave and Rich a heck of a lot of credit for that. And then later, when it came time for me to retire, I was going to retire. And I retired in 2014, July 1st. And somewhere that year, and I had not talked to Dave, he had told Phil and Jan that I was going to be retiring soon. And sure enough, I did. I don't know how he figured that out, but somehow he did. And that was it. So a lot of remembrances, a lot of good times with the family.
So hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Ryan, and while many of you know him as David or Dave, I'll always know him as Dad. So how do I know him? Know him as the dad who put his PhD on a permanent hold because I was born. The dad who could do this funny finger popping sound that would make any toddler laugh. The dad who would have me check out behind him at the grocery store so he could use an extra coupon just because an item was on sale, despite me being so little I couldn't see over the belt and was nervous about the beeping scanner. The dad who introduced me to football on a cold, windy November afternoon in the upper deck of Spartan Stadium at the ripe age of 4 years old, one game that turned into 30 years of Saturday afternoon tradition. The dad who always found his way to my sporting games. The dad who gave me consequences for my inability to keep a clean room, and more consequences when I claimed I had a condition that prevented me from having a clean room called chronic cleanophilia. And by the way, if you're a parent and the extent of consequences you hand out are limited to a messy room, I think you're doing a pretty good job as a parent. The dad who sacrificed his career and a move to North Carolina that he really wanted because I didn't want to leave East Lansing, my grandparents and my friends. The dad who cared so much about the counseling profession and sponsoring people, trying to help them just be a little bit better as they traverse life's challenges and hardships. The dad who wanted me to be a safe driver, so he'd take me to the MSU pavilion to practice on Sunday mornings, only to see me get pulled over by the head of the Michigan State Police Driving Academy before I even got my permit. Continuing on with driving, the dad who asked me to practice a controlled skid in winter weather, and whose neck veins popped out when I replied, okay, but when are we going to simulate a rollover? Dad who rode shotgun on Route 66 with his son talking about life. Dad who would drive 12 hours through thick and thin to spend time with his mom, his siblings, Norman, Janet, and Richard. Dad who loved his family. Dad who would check in on my grandma, his ex-mother-in-law, at least twice a week when I couldn't because I lived in New York. The dad who encouraged me and asked me only to do my best. And I discovered that you can go farther than most by simply doing your best. The dad who was always there for me at my best and my worst and supported me at whatever I wanted to do. The dad who never let me down on anything that mattered. a dad who continues to influence and serve as an inspiration for me as a dad who is so excited to become a grandpa, the grandpa who would spend a day flying around the world so he could spend time with Colette, the grandpa who would play Barbie dolls or color with chalk for hours despite any of his own pain or discomfort, the grandpa who willingly took orders from boss baby Mason until he literally had no energy left to give, the grandpa whose heart melted for Colette and Mason, the dad who shattered my expectations of him as a grandpa in ways that I wonder if he'll ever know, the dad who's the world's greatest dad to me. Colette and Mason miss and love Grandpa so much. I love you, Dad. And as you'd say, I hope you're creating a wonderful day.
I would add that David was tremendously proud of Ryan and his family. The two grandchildren, he enjoyed their company. I know when Dave was going through his tough times, when he only had 2 or 3 more years to live, and he went beyond that, I think well beyond that, we were hoping he would get more time to spend with his grandchildren, and he did. And I think our prayers were answered in that regard. And when Dave left, of course we all miss him, but when Dave left, I'm losing my thought. I've lost it. I'm not crying, but I've lost it.
Yeah.
And, that's as close as I can get. But when Dave left, again, he was always proud and proud of Ryan. We visited David somewhere around 2005, maybe 2006. We had taken a trip out to Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's Robbie and myself to go to the Mall of America. And on the way back, we stopped by Lansing, Michigan. We met Dave for dinner, and he talked about family, he talked about Ryan and closeness and that sort of thing. And we really enjoyed it. Saw a little bit different side of my brother because now he's a parent, and I'd never seen that before with him. And it was nice to see. And we enjoyed that visit. He showed us around Lansing, and he took us to Michigan State University, drove us around the campus. And it was really, really nice. And one of the best memories I have. I get many, many memories of David. And as you look back, they're good. Even the ones that weren't so good were good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all agree that when David got it together, he certainly, his biggest job of his life, he ended up with an A+, and that was bringing up his son. We're very, very proud of him and what he had done and his love and devotion for those 2 little beautiful grandchildren that he has, Colette and Mason.
It's fortunate sometimes how things work out, because the impact he had, in his second career, if you want to call it that, or maybe his life, frankly, his life calling or passion, right, was helping people. And, he did a heck of a job on it, whether it was sponsoring people or through, counseling and, the employee assistance program that, you referenced earlier. He was really good at it. And some of the stories and things, that he had to deal with, he impacted a lot of people's lives in ways that we probably, don't know.
That's right. And he always said he never would have been there if he hadn't been where he was before that.
Went through that.
Everything in life leads to it.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So in many ways, he was blessed.
He was.
Yeah, he was. Yep.
Yeah.
I can't think of my history with David without smiling. For 9 years, we were a team. I was the minister, and he was the president of the steering committee, the body through which all the fellowship's plans, intentions, expenditures, and ideas passed. If David and I were on the same page, the fellowship's life was good. Consequently, our communication was a priority, and therefore we met together every week, Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. in various coffee shops at first, eventually settling on the one closest to my house. We met like this for years and became each other's touchstones in life. Of course, we discussed the fellowship's business, but as you can imagine, many other topics were covered in those weekly meetings. Often our sons. Another thing we had in common. Ryan traveled, and through his dad, on all of our discussions, I shared those adventures. From his college years to Asia and back, and then to marriage and children. And all of us who have been in touch with David for the last few years know without a doubt that Ryan's beautiful children were the mountaintop experience for David. To conclude, my relationship with David was like no other. We shared our spiritual journey, our personal journey, our beliefs, and our lives. And for all of you, I can say, without any doubt in my mind, that our David is fine. He's with us right now, and with that great smile and twinkle in his eye. If you are so inclined, talk to him. I know he'll answer.
I'm so happy to be able to share some thoughts about David this afternoon with all of you. During one of our talks, David shared with me that it was in March of 1988 that a friend invited him to join him at a fellowship service. And he attended that Sunday and just continued ever since that first time that he came to the fellowship, and that was 32 years ago. He became a truly foundational member of the fellowship, guiding us as a steering committee member and president, and in so many other ways contributing his time and talent. We were so grateful to have him. He was an inspiration to so many, and he really considered our fellowship community his family, which was, and we considered him family as well. He was just completely dedicated and devoted to the fellowship. I will always remember during a membership meeting one afternoon, he spoke up with a little bit of annoyance in his voice, saying, "It doesn't matter to me who is speaking at the fellowship, who is playing, who is singing. If it's the fellowship, I'll be there." And he was making his point. Let's just all come together as a spiritual community. It doesn't matter who's talking or singing that day. And I will never forget that. And another inspiration was that David was so devoted to his spiritual path. He was always available to talk about spirituality in general, and always available to talk to me about all things fellowship. He was just always up for it. And that was so helpful to me, especially just starting out as the new spiritual director and and having someone so knowledgeable and having someone that had been so immersed in the fellowship for such a long time. One of the things that I'm going to take with me and continue to share with people is this. David didn't say, "Have a good day," as most of us do. David said, "Create a good day." He always said that when he was saying goodbye. "Goodbye, Mayor, create a good day." And I always really love that gentle reminder that we are always making choices, and we can choose to create a good day, a mediocre day, or a bad day, but let's do it consciously and intentionally, and let it be a great day. So I'm going to just carry that little tradition on, and I've already started doing that with our fellowship members. I know that I certainly do, and I know all of our fellowship family miss him terribly. We miss his sparkle in his eyes, his smile, his hugs, and just his beautiful, loving presence. But I do know this: he is with us now. He is, and he will be with us, and he's whispering in our ear, "Create a good day."
Hello, my name is Deborah Goro, and it is an honor to share some of my memories about Dave Dubuc. David was my dear friend for 17 years. We first met at Fellowship for Today. Shortly after that, he started coming to me for reflexology. He came every other week for 15 years until he was too sick from the cancer. During these sessions, David and I got to know each other very well. Early on, we realized we shared a love for the Course in Miracles. For a few years in the beginning, David would bring the Course in Miracles text to the reflexology appointments, and he would read to me, which I loved. We had some really great conversations. Later, David, Beth Monteith, Susan McPeak, and I began a Course in Miracles study group, which continued for several years. Wonderful memories for me. David was one of the most generous people I've ever known. We shared a love of musicals and theater, and over the years, he treated me to many, many, many shows at the Wharton. He loved to make dreams come true and see people smile. One Christmas, he made my dream come true and bought my daughter, Britton, a plane ticket so she could come home and be with me. David was also very generous with his time. He volunteered at Fellowship for Today in many, many ways for many, many years. He was always there for me if I needed help, and I'm sure for many of his other friends as well. After David retired, he started to volunteer every week at Stoneleigh Hospice. He really loved the time he spent there and felt very honored to be present with the residents on their final journey. Of course, the staff loved David, who didn't? This was where David spent his last few days with people who knew and loved him. The last time I saw David was at Stoneleigh Hospice, the day he passed away. Because of COVID, I had to be outside of his window. He was unconscious, finally out of pain, and resting so peacefully. The nurse was so kind and held his phone to his ear so I could talk to him. I said my goodbyes and started to leave, feeling very sad and already missing him so much. I looked down, and there in front of me was a beautiful turkey feather. Now, David knew that my deceased mother would let me know she was with me by leaving a feather. I feel that this was David's way of saying, "Hey, I'm okay, and I'll be with you whenever you need me." So, this is the turkey feather I found, and it really was beautiful when I found it, but my little kid got a hold of it somehow. But it's still so precious to me. After David retired, he started to travel a lot. He went to Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Australia, Iceland, Greece, Russia, Ireland, Scotland, Hawaii, Martinique, and even more than that. I don't even remember all of them. Every time he went on a trip, I would ask him to bring back a rock for me, which he did. I have a lot of rocks. My favorite rocks were the ones that were heart-shaped. And my most favorite of all was one that he brought from Meteora, Greece. And I brought it to show you. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little white. But what's so amazing is if you turn it this way. This is so precious to me. I mentioned earlier that David and I went to lots of musicals. My favorite musical was Wicked, and David took me to that show 3 times, and I loved it more each time. My favorite song comes at the end of the show. The words say perfectly how I feel about David, and the words are, because I knew you, I have been changed for good. And David, because I knew you, I have been changed for good. Thank you for being in my life, David.
Hello, my name is Taylor Swan. I'm one of the ministers at the fellowship for today. I'm also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I just went, there I go, breaking my anonymity. David would have been proud of me for that. To David, I was Taylor. And I can remember that beginning many of our conversations. It was, Taylor, how are you today? I first came to know David at my AA home group. What brought my attention to him was his humility and his honesty. I can remember his response when I asked him to be my AA sponsor. His response was shock and maybe a little horror. I promised him that I was a low-maintenance sponsee. He could see me at meetings and at church, and I would ask little of his time. His response was, I need a few days to think about this. If I was to place bets on his response, it would not have been an affirmative answer. I did not bring it up to him again. I allowed a month or 2 to pass, and finally he agreed in his own time. He was a wise and patient man, a great choice as a sponsor. There was a lot to learn from this man, but it required quietly watching him and learning how he lived his life. He was a great source of practical wisdom for me. I also enjoyed his quick wit and Boston accent, which took me back to a fondness for the men that I used to ship out with, who were from the Boston area. I felt very comfortable with him for that reason. Not alone, but for that reason. Many times I encouraged him to let me interview him on video, knowing that the day would come when I would miss hearing his voice or seeing his face. However, that never came to pass. I think his humility kept this from happening. The last year of his life consisted of sometimes weekly trips to cancer therapies at the University of Michigan. I had the honor of being his driver and companion during many of these trips. These eventually consisted of an all-day commitment because of the length of the ride and the time spent in the therapy appointments. Because my business had fallen off to a trickle, I had the time to invest, and I enjoyed his company so much. I considered it a privilege to be his driver and companion. I learned a lot from David during these trips. Even though the rule of the ride was silence, allowing him to rest and look at the scenery, he still managed to share some important lessons with me about being an honorable man and living the principles of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. David used humor to teach and to share his feelings. One such time I was called into his treatment room to observe him as he woke up from a particularly painful procedure. They thought it would be good for him to awake to a familiar person. I sat by his bed for a while, allowing him to awake in his own time. After a while, a particularly beautiful young nurse came alongside his bed, and his eyes slowly opened. David said, am I in heaven? And then he looked over at me and said, oh, never mind. When you lose an important teacher, it leaves a hole in your life that's palpable. However, as long as I can remember special moments like this, his loss will be lessened. His laughter and his quick wit will be missed, but more than that, knowing that this special man loved me and was a true friend to me will remain with me for the rest of my life. I know when I cross the Rainbow Bridge myself, I'll hear someone say, Taylor, how are you today?
My name is Richard Child. I was a friend of David's, especially during the last 4 or so years of his life. And I spent a lot of time with him as he battled with lung cancer that eventually spread to the rest of his body. Amazing thing about David to me was the way he was able to accept that hardship, the tremendous physical pain, the loss of some of his memory, and the fact that he was in constant excruciating pain. I never once heard David complain. I never once heard him say anything that sounded like self-pity. He was and will always be an inspiration to me as the kind of person I aspire to be, and I'll always be grateful that I knew him.
I have one last little story. David was an avid A Course in Miracles student, and he studied every morning. He studied a lesson every morning, and he had these little cards that he would draw one each morning and clip it to his glasses case and read it periodically throughout the day. This is one that we drew today out of the little box, and we want to share it with you. When a mind has only light, it knows only light. Its only radiance shines all around it and extends out into the darkness of other minds, transforming them into majesty. We know that was David sharing that with us today. We are all so grateful to be able to come together to celebrate David's life this afternoon with family and friends. But we know this is not the end. David is with us. He lives in our hearts and in our minds and our memories. And I know that David is free and happy, and he is gently holding us in a circle of love until we heal from the loss of him here on earth. So much love to everyone who has joined us this afternoon. I want to invite you now to stay with us. We've prepared a video of remarkable photos of David's life, and we'd love for you to enjoy watching these photos and enjoy continuing to remember David and his really, really wonderful life with us. The music that you'll be hearing is entitled Invocation. It was written and sung by our dear Jim Noble. So enjoy, and much love to you all.
Great Spirit, holy source of light, let your light shine bright, shine within our hearts and minds so we reflect the purpose of our soul. May your love unfold, may your peace within our hearts abide. It's time now for the lion down with the Lamb. May we find the peace of God, the heart of your I am. May true love and meaning every human find. May your light shine brightly forth in every heart and mind. Oh, great Spirit, holy source of light, let your light shine bright, illuminating all our lives so we reflect the magnitude of love, below so as above. May love and peace within our hearts abide.
A Course in Miracles, Lesson 189. I feel the love of God within me now. To feel the love of God within you is to see the world anew, shining in innocence, alive with hope, and blessed with perfect charity and love. Who could feel fear in such a world as this?